So Elden Ring Nightreign is out, and in my personal opinion, this game's a 10 out of 10. It's incredible. And not only is the gameplay awesome, but the lore is as well. Executor has been my go-to character since day one because it is just so cool. The mixture of the Crucible, Sekiro, and the combat of Elden Ring is just perfect. Not only is that awesome, but the lore is as well, and that is what I want to talk about in today's video. For Executor is by far becoming one of my favourite characters in all of FromSoftware's games. This character links in with the Crucible, Crucible Knights, the Land of Reeds, and so much more. If you want to see more Nightreign content, consider leaving a like and subscribe as it greatly helps the channel, and it means you won't miss another one. Please friends, sit back, relax, grab some succulent, juicy, tender and sensational prawns if you want, and enjoy. Executor hails from the Land of Reeds. The Land of Reeds is a land locked in a bloody civil war, and takes a lot of inspiration from Ashina from Sekiro, not to mention the actual Sengoku period of Japan in our real world. The very interesting part of Executor is he's in fact one of the only people in Nightreign who lived to see the glory days of the Erdtree. Throughout his quest, his Erdtree becomes more and more defined in his paintings. And as it becomes more defined, we also get more journal entries, more memories are recovered from Executor's past. One such memory is the fact he washed ashore on the lands between, and was utterly captivated by the golden hue of the Erdtree. So much in fact that he eventually became a Crucible Knight. Hindsight 2020, because if you look at the Executor's armor set, you'll notice it's very similar to all the Crucible armor we see inside of Elden Ring. The signature branch and root-like markings upon the Crucible armour is also seen upon Executor's armour. We do not know the specific circumstances which led to Executor becoming a Crucible Knight, as seen in his final memory, but what we do know is that he was a loyal Crucible Knight until his crimes as an Executor for the Golden Order became too much. So much so that he committed seppuku. Seppuku is a Japanese way of committing suicide. It was used by samurai to give themselves an honourable death. Which makes sense considering the person he's hunched over when he commits seppuku is a dead maiden. Considering he's literally got his sword in his hand, it's most likely that he killed this maiden. A defenceless maiden, for she has no weapons on her. Not to mention how small she is, it's most likely she's a child. This was probably too much for Executor and he killed himself. Not only does this explain a lot about Nightfarers, but it also explains about the hunting down of maidens inside of Elden Ring. We know that our maiden was slaughtered inside of base game, but maybe that wasn't just for our maiden, maybe that was a common practice. Sadly, our sources of that time are very limited, but considering what we've just seen in this final memory, I wouldn't put it past the Golden Order. Perhaps as a survival of the fittest-esque challenge for the maidens. Before we go on to how this memory actually affects the Nightfarers and how it affects everything we know about them, I first want to talk about two things. First of all, the cutscene that we see takes place before we enter the lands between. This is seen for two reasons. In the cutscene, we can actually see where this is in the lands between. It's located in the Atlas Plateau, shock horror. But we can actually see the windmill village and a minor Erdtree in the background. Using this, we can pinpoint the location of where this cutscene takes place, and it doesn't 100% exist in the current state of Elden Ring base game. The closest you can get is what you're seeing on the screen right now. The thing is, there's no bridge here, a bridge that even in Elden Ring is decayed and broken, suggesting that inside this cutscene it hadn't been created yet, by proxy making the cutscene a long time ago. Another thing is the fact that the point of view that we see inside the cutscene can't be viewed inside of Elden Ring's base game because there has been a rock slide. If you actually look, the actual point of view in the cutscene is further upwards than we can actually get when not being on the bridge, meaning the actual place that they were standing on is completely gone. Once again suggesting that this was a very long time ago before we stepped foot in the lands between. The third thing which suggests this is the fact that we actually see the roads haven't been built yet. All throughout the Atlas Plateau is these paths which have these rocky outposts. And yet in the cutscene these are only wooden, they aren't stone yet. Once more telling us that this cutscene was a very long time ago. Inside of the final remembrance, we actually fight ourselves. It might seem like we're fighting a different person, but we're not. The the two characters we fight are two different halves of our memories. In the fight, we play as the one that wears Land of Reeds-esque armour. Once you kill yourself, not actually the seppuku yet, but just genuinely you kill your other self in a fight, it tells you to not avert your gaze from the truth. When you walk into the hut, you see this same scene that we were just talking about, that of the Crucible Knight committing seppuku. And the Crucible Knight dies? But that doesn't make any sense. We exist as Executor inside of Nightreign. And make no mistake, this is in fact Executor. For starters, he's wearing Crucible armour. Secondly, he's using a katana that we see no other Crucible Knights using. And thirdly, well, this is Executor's memories. The reason the Executor is probably so tall in this memory is that the Crucible Knight armour most likely has added support to extend the height of yourself. This makes a lot of sense, for every Crucible Knight is the same height, or at least most of them are. Not to mention, you're fighting a lot of big enemies as a Crucible Knight. You're going to need to be tall to be able to stand head to head with your enemies. Hence why I believe they've got makeshift heels in the bottom of their shoes. Earlier in the video, I said this affects the Nightfarers. How does it? Well, for starters, this motherfucker's dead. He's killed himself. And yet we play him inside of Nightreign, which is eons later. Evidently, they've been revived. They're there in Nightreign. But how? I believe it is the blue flame, the knight that we see surrounding Grace inside of Nightreign. In all the trailers that we see, when these guys are dying, you'll notice that they have these same blue flames dancing around their skin. This is most recently seen with Wilder in one of the most recent trailers, and we also see this blue flame flickering around Grace inside the Round Table Hold. Grace brings back to life people inside of Elden Ring's base game. But there are other things that are said to be similar to Grace, for example the Ghost Flame. Is it so far-fetched there would also be another one that is similar to Grace? I don't think so, and I believe that is exactly what this is, and what brought back all the Nightfarers back to life. I now want to talk about Suncatcher. If you don't know, this is the blade which is used by Executioner to deflect and parry, and then subsequently used to do this sort of slash thing where you use the skill button after you deflect it a certain amount of times. This is very interesting for two different reasons. First of all, it has a very similar colour palette to the Crucible and to the branch-like tree we see sticking into Midra inside of the DLC. Both these things were used by people who were associated with the Crucible. For example, the Hornsent put this branch inside of Midra and they worship the Crucible. Executor was a Crucible Knight. While we're on the topic of being a Crucible Knight, I think it's really ironic that a person that is not from the Lands Between was one of the most powerful Crucible users inside the Crucible Knights. The Crucible Knights use semi-transformative moves, for example wings and tails, but never anything on a large scale, and yet the ultimate for Executor is turning into a goddamn dinosaur, which uses Crucible attacks. The connection between the Hornsent and with Executor furthers when you realise this transformed mode looks very similar to the hung up Hornsent Crucible creatures inside of the Shadowkeep. The Shadowkeep may be used by Mesmer, but considering their presence and the libraries containing information from the Hornsent, it makes a lot of sense that this was once an area used by the Hornsent for research. The presence of these creatures makes me believe that they are specimens of the Hornsent which have obtained a harmonious relationship with the Crucible, leading to this transformation. I believe this same thing occurs with the Executor, only it's less full, considering he reverts back to his original form after a while. There are omen creatures inside the Lands Between which possess the Crucible, and yet I've always thought it a bit strange that there is no Hornsent. They are devoid from the Lands Between. Yes, there was the massacre, but it's illogical to think that there weren't Hornsent which escaped Marika's rule, escaped their vengeance. And I believe the result of where they went was the Lands of Reeds. It makes perfect sense. It's an isolated land, so that means Shaman can't readily come and kill them. It means they've got good defences that people can't get in. It's a bloodied land, and we know the Hornsent are no stranger to violence considering all the atrocities they've committed. The Suncatcher is eerily similar to the colour palette of the Hornsent's Crucible incantations, and also similar to the branches we see sticking into Midra. And the final nail in the coffin is that no one inside the Crucible Knights, no one inside the Lands Between, apart from the Executor, has been able to achieve this level of synchronization with the Crucible apart from the Hornsent. You might be thinking that is all there is to the Suncatcher, all there is to this powerful weapon, but you'd be completely wrong. The Suncatcher has its own voice, one that was lost long ago, but is forever loyal to its master. What the fuck do you mean a sword has a voice? Sounds pretty mental, doesn't it? And yeah, it does. I originally thought that this was talking about the Executor, that he is the blade and the voice he lost was the memories of his past, and yet he's forever loyal to what he can't remember. And while I do like that interpretation, I think it's more likely this sword is sentient. Inside of Sekiro, there's the Mortal Blades, the Black Mortal Blade and then the normal Mortal Blade. They're twin weapons. Executor found this sword, and I can't help but notice the similarities between the Black Mortal Blade and the Mortal Blade. Both have their specific colours hovering over the blade part of this katana. They look similar and they supposedly come from the same land, considering Ashina from Sekiro is most likely the lands of reeds. When it says that it lost its voice, I believe this was the removal of death from the Elden Ring. We know inside of Sekiro the mortal blades are used to slay immortals. Is it so far-fetched to think that the removal of the rune of death would lead to consequences for such beings which can kill even the most immortal? Honestly, I really like this idea and I think it is the case. If it is the case, it means the beings inside of Sekiro that are immortal are in fact not fully immortal, and instead have most likely prolonged their lifespan. And then when the subsequent removal of the rune of death occurred, they lost that ability of immortality. And by proxy, so did the Mortal Blades, which I believe Suncatcher is. I saw this on a comment inside of a Nightreign video and it's stuck with me ever since. And there's absolutely no way I can't mention it in today's video. There are said to be 16 Crucible Knights that are actually inside the lands between, and yet we only find 15 inside of Elden Ring. I believe the 16th Crucible Knight is in fact Executor. I believe, considering he did evil deeds for the Golden Order, that he was buried under the rug and forgotten to time, which was possibly what allowed his body to be preserved enough to be able to be revived in the future. The 16th Crucible Knight has always been a mystery, and I believe this is what solves it. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel and lets me know you're enjoying this style of content. How are you all enjoying Nightreign? I'm personally absolutely loving it, but I'm really curious to see what you all have to say. Anyway, not going to ramble on anymore. Please friends, don't you dare go hollow, and may you find your worth in the waking world. See you in the next one, and goodbye.